everybody, and welcome again to the Faber podcast. And this is a podcast where we talk about children, their behaviors, their development, and how to best support them. We have been doing a series on disabilities in children and how to help children who may have a disability to get the best experience out of life. I'm your host, Dr. Lillian Kerubo, a pediatrician and behavior enthusiast. Welcome to this week's episode. Remember to like, to comment, to share, and let us know what you think about the episode. This week, we are talking about learning disabilities or intellectual disabilities. Learning disabilities are difficulties in understanding, processing, or manipulating the information that is presented to us so that we can then change our behavior in response to our surroundings. So the process of learning is an intricate and lifelong process that happens in every individual. And learning does not necessarily have to happen in school. Every time you experience a stimulus, every time you experience, you get new information, the human mind is programmed to receive that information, to process it, to see what parts of it are relevant, to store parts of it in our memory, and then alter our behavior in response to the information that we have received from the stimulus. And that is what we call the process of learning. However, due to some challenges, some children are not able to have this process go on smoothly. Or to basically end up with the result that we would expect them to when exposed to a particular stimulus. So how do you suspect, or what will make you think that a child might have a learning disability? Some of the things that we see in children who may have a learning disability include struggling with directions. There are children who, beyond the age of 5 or 6, are still struggling to know the difference between left or right. They're struggling to know forwards and backwards. They're struggling to know, even to remember the path home from a relatively common distance that they have used severally. Perhaps you go for a walk with your child every day around your neighborhood, and at age 7 or age 6, they're still not familiar with the journey or the path. That could signify that your child has a learning disability. If your child has trouble staying seated or paying attention for a considerable period of time, of course, we don't expect children to stay seated for an hour, but we expect a 5 or 6-year-old to be able to stay seated for at least 10 to 15 minutes. So if your child is unable to do this, it could be a signal that your child has a learning disability. If your child forgets previously mastered concepts or knowledge, let's say your child had mastered the alphabet by age 5, and then they later on forget it, it could be a clue that they may be having a learning disability. If your child has difficulty writing, drawing, or coloring inappropriate for their age, for example, we expect a 6-year-old child to be able to write their name. So if your child at 6 years is struggling to write down their name, is struggling to shade within the lines, it's struggling to draw simple shapes like a circle or a square, it could be a clue that they may be having a learning disability. If your child consistently gets low grades despite adequate effort to learn the material, either by the child themselves or the parent or the teacher, it could also be a clue that they may be having a learning disability. So it's not always the case that a child who performs poorly in school simply doesn't want to apply themselves. It could be that they have applied themselves to the best of their ability. The teacher could have done, could have given their effort to the best of their ability. However, the child may be having a learning disability. If you notice that your child has difficulty in applying the knowledge that they have gained and generalizing it to the rest of their lives, for example, once your child has been taught the concept of addition, simple number addition. It is the expectation that the child should apply that concept to other areas of their lives. Maybe when they are playing and they're sharing out toys and they're sharing out snacks. These are areas where you assess whether the concepts that have been taught have been generalized to the other areas of their life. So if you notice that your child is having challenges doing that, could be a clue that your child may be having a learning disability. What causes learning disabilities in children? There are many causes of learning disabilities in children, and we're not going to list all of them. We're just going to talk about some that may be common or that we see more frequently, especially in Kenya and in Africa. The commonest causes of learning disabilities are developmental disorders such as ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, and other genetic illnesses such as Fragile X. This is because the brains of these children work differently and therefore they learn differently. And so if we use the same methods to assess their intelligence, we are likely to encounter learning challenges. So it's important to know that when a child has a developmental disorder, their methods of learning, their methods of processing information is very different. Therefore, the methods that we use to assess their intelligence should also be different. Children who are malnourished, who don't have adequate nutrition, who are underweight, also end up having learning disabilities because the brain is also starved of nutrition. And when the brain is starved of nutrition, it will not perform the functions that it is supposed to be doing, such as memorization, understanding, and generalization. Children who are neglected or who suffer emotional trauma also end up having learning disabilities because a lot of the trauma has affected the functioning of the brain. This is very common with children who have been sexually assaulted, physically assaulted, children who are orphans, children who have experienced civil war, or who are internally displaced person. Often their grades slip, and often they don't perform too well in school because of the trauma that they have experienced. Children who experience traumatic brain injuries, maybe they were involved in an accident and they suffered brain damage, also may end up having learning disabilities. We also notice learning disabilities in children who have diseases such as meningitis, kidney disease, or heart failure. This is because these are chronic diseases that affect the metabolism of the body, and so the ability of the brain to process and remember information is affected when you have a chronic illness. Adolescents and young adults who participate in drug abuse also affect their learning ability. It's common to see grade slipping when young adults and adolescents start abusing drugs, especially drugs such as cannabis, cocaine, and heroin. Children who grow up in extreme poverty, who experience a language barrier, or who experience a mental illness also often have learning disabilities. And children who have other disabilities such as blindness and deafness, if these disabilities are not accommodated, may also end up having a learning disability. So how do we support children who may have learning disabilities? The first thing we should do is to have a discussion with our children and their teachers, or those who are involved in training them, so that we find out what strengths and what weaknesses our children have. Perhaps the learning style or the teaching style that is being used to train the child is not appropriate for the child's development or the child's abilities. For example, if the teacher the teacher's expectation is that the child will memorize all the information that has been presented to them. A child who has cerebral palsy may struggle with that expectation, for example. However, if the child is educated or trained in a manner that they are able to receive it, maybe by using teaching aids, maybe by using modeling, or maybe by using role models, this child is able to understand and grasp the information better. The other thing we can do is to help our children, especially particularly those who may have ADHD, because one of their challenges is paying attention. So what we can do with them is to repeat the information that was given to them in class. Perhaps when they get home, we can give them remedial classes or extra coaching, basically increase the exposure of the child to the information, increase the touch points, so that their chances of remembering, their chances of understanding, and their chances of generalizing are increased. The other thing we can do with our children is to find out their learning style. As we've mentioned, some children learn by modeling, others by observation, others by acting out or role playing. Other children learn by budding them up with another child, and they learn by observing their peer performing the task, or manipulating the objects. So it's important to learn how our children prefer to learn or are able to learn, so that we can incorporate those learning styles into their everyday activities. It's also important to celebrate small milestones. Often as parents, we get so caught up with our expectations of our children that we forget to celebrate their small wins. We often expect all children to get, a very high grades and score all A's, and we forget that for a child, even moving from a 10% to a 20% is a great milestone. So as parents, let's remember to celebrate the small wins. We should also assist our children to get skills or vocational training that can be used later on as a means of sustenance. Remember that not all children are gifted academically, and not all children will thrive in an office setup. There are children who thrive in the field, there are children who thrive in the industries, and there are children who thrive when they work using their hands. Not everyone thrives when we put them in front of a computer, for example. So it's important to know what your child's skills are, what your child's abilities are, and to assist them in becoming the best that they can be in that field and in that vocation. The other thing we can do as parents and guardians is to apply for and to follow through with learning supports that are offered. We now have a lot of educational assessment centers that are able to assess children who have learning disabilities and offer learning supports. Of course, as Africa and as Kenya, we are still trailing behind in the supports that are available to our children. Most of the time, the supports available have to be purchased and have to be the financial burden is transferred to the parent, which should not be the case. All children should be supported by the state to learn, and children with disabilities are often left behind because what they need to learn is considered expensive and is considered unnecessary, and so you find the parent is bearing the financial brunt of supporting this child through their education. Some of the supports required may be hearing aids, maybe braille, text books written in braille. They may be in the form of a special seat or a special chair that can be used in class with a special table. Some of the supports required may be robotics, because some of the children may not be able to use their hands, or they may not be able to copy what is on the board. So all these are learning supports that are available elsewhere that should be available to all children who may have learning disabilities. Don't forget to share this episode with somebody who you think may benefit from it, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We are going to take a small break, as is our norm, and we shall see you when we come back. In the meantime, I am accessible through my socials on Twitter, on Instagram, and on my website www.difffaba.org, and I will put those on the show notes, and you can be able to reach me anytime. Till next time, bye bye.